Let me say the following. Lockdown kills. It's as simple as that. And that's what the data is telling us. You have a 90% increase in death rates because of lockdown. That's what the only impact assessment ever done on this question and published is telling you.
This is measured Nawaz. He lost his grandmother to COVID-19 in the UK, supposedly. He says we don't know what it was because we don't have the stats on it. The government's been very quiet on it. This is 5 minutes, but it's very important you guys listen to this, because what he does is he compares how many deaths are due to the lockdown in the UK and how many deaths are going to be due to coronavirus, and it's quite startling. Get your notepad out. This is for your notes, guys.
Let me say the following. Lockdown kills. It's as simple as that. And that's what the data is telling us. And I'll explain to you why. The government, according to the Times, and you can look this up, has a dossier from the Office for National Statistics that tells them the data of what we're calling now an impact assessment. And the question is, you're saying we need to save lives. Well, okay, how many lives will die through the lockdown measures compared to how many lives you will save through lockdown? Now, that's a simple question that should be quite easy to respond to if you're government, because you have something called the Office for National Statistics, which collects all of that data. And when the backbench MPs in the Conservative Party demanded that data from government, the response was government refused to answer and didn't release the data. The Times then recently discovered that they do indeed have this information in a quote-unquote secret dossier that they refuse to release. And so it comes back down to that simple question. Do we know how many people would die because of lockdown compared to how many people will die if we do not lock down? And if we don't know that answer, then are we just clutching at straws in the dark? And the key thing here is actually that evidence hasn't been published by government. And so anyone claiming that they follow experts and evidence has no right whatsoever and no basis to say they're following evidence that lockdown works, because they haven't seen the evidence. We now know the government refuses to publish the evidence as to whether lockdown kills more people than not locking down. But I'll tell you who has published an impact assessment. It's the only one available when it comes to this particular question of whether lockdowns work or not. And that's Professor Philip Thomas from Bristol University. Now, why is he important? Because he happens to have done an impact assessment on whether lockdown kills more people or not. And it's the only one available. So if you claim to follow evidence and data, then what you should do is look at that evidence, because there is no other evidence published on that question. Now, his evidence, and he's a professor of risk management at Bristol, so you kind of think he'd know what he's talking about when it comes to risks of certain actions being taken and modelling for those risks. And what he said, and I'll tell you exactly where you can find this, it's an article by Stephen Adams, who's the medical editor for the Mail on Sunday. And it was published on the 8th of November, 2020, this year. And what he says, this is the headline: lockdown will claim the equivalent of 560,000 lives because of the health impact of the deep and prolonged recession it will cause. He, in his impact assessment, covered exactly this question as to how many people die if we don't lock down through COVID. And he said only 10% of the figure, quote unquote only, every death is too many, only 10% of the figure of the total that will die because of lockdown, 560,000, only 10% of that number will die through COVID by the lockdown measures that are there to protect lives. You have a 90% increase in death rates because of lockdown. That's what the only impact assessment ever done on this question and published is telling you. So if you claim you're sick of people telling you don't listen to the experts, as you talk about with Brexiters, and Michael Gove's infamous interview, then please, A, don't straw man me when I give you this evidence, and B, practice what you preach and follow the evidence. I am sick and tired of people saying one thing and doing another, because it's literally killing people out there, as the evidence is indicating to us. And it's not just this 560,000 lives we're talking of, because that's in Britain. Then you look at what the head of the UN said. Hundreds of thousands of children would die this year alone because of the economic harm of lockdown globally. Now, if the evidence is telling us this, then why is the public being scared and bumped into supporting another lockdown. Well, another topic for another day, and I promise you I will address this, is the conflict of interests involved in those advocating lockdown. Now, whether you talk about Matt Hancock and his mate, the former pub landlord, who got a multi-million-pound contract for PPE, never having provided PPE to anyone before, his expertise was running a pub. Right? But his friend, a pub landlord, got multi-million-pound contracts. Now, whether it's that or whether it's Rishi Sunak's hedge fund that he founded with the majority share in vaccine companies, there are major conflicts of interest. Just go to the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, look up Kamran Abbasi, the executive editor, look up the editorial he wrote on this. It is absolutely damning. He uses the word criminal weaponization of science. Now, don't blame me if you're not being told this stuff. I am screaming from the rooftops about it every opportunity I've got. But if you genuinely claim to believe in evidence and experts, please look it up for yourselves and actually follow the evidence. And I will put to you one challenge. Where is the evidence that lockdown saves more lives than not locking down?
Go for it.
That's what really makes me angry. When they say, I believe in science. I've had a massive fallout with one of my oldest friends, very well educated, right? I refused to speak to her anymore, okay, because she actually said, you're a conspiracy theorist and I believe in science. And I lost it. I said, you believe in science? You're a lawyer and you believe in science. You actually believe that phrase. Okay, have they separated COVID from the flu? Can they recognize it? No, they can't, right? Will this vaccine stop us from getting the virus or spreading the virus? No, it will not. I cannot believe that you and many others use this excuse. I believe in the science. If you believe in the science, you should be preaching louder than me, because the science shows this thing is not as bad as everybody's making out to be. They can't recognize it, they can't separate it, and the vaccine that they want to give us isn't going to stop it. So what's the point? And here's the point, and I found it out yesterday. The president of Belarus came out and said, I was bribed by the World Health Organization and whatever it is, that other organization, I've got it here on the phone, $950 million on the basis that he shuts down, makes mandatory face masks, okay? And collapses the economy. Now, whether he said no because he wanted more, I don't know. But he said, no, I'm not doing it. Okay? We went through bushfires. We have farmers committing suicide. And our government said, we are broke. They asked for $120 million in aid. No. The fire-affected communities asked for help. They said no. And the leader of the so-called leader of our nation has the audacity to go to a fire-affected community with an Aldi's bag. How appalling and disgusting is that? We have no money. But as soon as somebody goes achoo, instead of saying God bless you, the government throws $2.4 billion at it. Now tell me, what have we sold? Where did this money come from? We were broke. Now we have $2.4 billion, $150 million to set up testing facilities, $30 million in an advertising campaign. And you people want to say, I believe in the science? Look, let me tell you where you can take your science and stick it. This is ridiculous.
Riccardo.
There's nothing more to add. You've said it eloquently. You've absolutely nailed it. There is no science. There is no consistency. We know it. There hasn't been consistency since this started. The governments are crooks. They have an agenda, and I think we've mentioned before the fact that state legislation was passed years ago in order to have the legislation in place to forcibly vaccinate people 4 years later. And the media is absolutely complicit. And here's a promise for you. When A1 becomes the federal government, and we will, and be a lot sooner than people think, there will be a royal commission into the government's response to COVID, and everybody found guilty will pay, and that includes the media. Every one of these idiot talking heads will pay one way or the other. Everyone will be held to account.
Please allow me to hold the axe.
I think it was Riccardo in the very first podcast we did with you here. Riccardo said, when people find out what's happened, we'll have to hold them back. And I totally believe that to be true. In summary, guys, what Measured Nawaz just covered, As I said, a guy that's lost his grandmother, he couldn't see his grandfather to show him his newborn kid. This is a guy that's a progressive. He didn't vote Brexit, yet he can see the science. He just outlaid the fact that the government has this information, how many people will die due to lockdowns and not die to lockdowns. It's a 90% increase if you lock down. Great, well done, brilliant. 500,000, over 500,000. Not only that, the government rubs salt into injury with the conflicts of interest. These government officials, Rishi Sunak, who's their treasurer, getting deals off this sort of stuff through his various dealings, and someone else. This is not good. This is not good for public interest. But why lockdowns? And this leads into our next story. China's economy will overtake the US by 2028 because of coronavirus. Isn't that just brilliant? According to the Center for Economic and Business Research, China is on track to become the world's largest economy by 2028, 5 years earlier than predicted, while India is thought to become the world's third largest economy by 2030. Ricardo, if this investigation highlights the fact that China is the source of all this, for a number, on a number of different levels, whether it be corrupt officials or whether it be the origins of coronavirus, where do we go from there?
2 points. One, just remember, China is a puppet like everybody else. Xi Jinping isn't some global dictator with the world on a string. He follows orders. China, I explained last time, Communist China was created by the US deep state after the Second World War. Mao Zedong's communists were armed and Chiang Kai-shek's democratic Chinese were disarmed. So there was a creation. So China's a puppet like everybody else. So that's point number one. They're using the Chinese model because the Chinese communist model is one that the globalists want to see the entire planet under. Point number two, Trump's going to become the president of the US. He's going to have a second term. He will. And the Chinese economy will collapse like a balloon hit by a pin because it's already very, very fragile as it is anyway. It's only propped up. And when the US takes off with the second Trump term, it'll crush China, and India better tighten up and clean up its game too, because if they wanted to, they can destroy the Indian economy as well, simply by just doing business with everybody else. These multilateral trade deals, we've discussed it before, complete rubbish. Bilateral is the only way to go. Reciprocal rights, reciprocal benefits, no problem. And that's what's going to happen globally. These multilateral trade deals, China will collapse under a second Trump presidency, and India better be bloody careful too. So I'm not all that worried, because I know they're going to come a cropper.
Yeah.